I'm going to show you how to learn fluent Chinese without native speakers, without going to China, and even without leaving your house. 听着是不是不太真实呀？我要澄清一下，这不是什么灵丹妙药，只是一个大多数人都不知道的聪明方法。You see, the problem is most language teachers tell you that you need constant exposure to native speakers, that you need to maybe move to China, you need to find conversation partners or pay for expensive tutoring. But what if the secret to fluency isn't adding more time with native speakers, but instead reducing it drastically? I know that sounds kind of backwards, but I've used this exact system to improve my own Chinese all on my own, and I'm using it to help tons of our coaching clients, as well as our course members, with real great success so far. So by the end of this video, you'll understand what to do, when to do it, and roughly how long it will take to become fluent depending on your level, which is way faster than you think. And if you want more in-depth help, we have a free course that covers these topics in detail. I'll link it in the description below. So most Chinese learners live outside of China, obviously, including you probably watching this video. And everyone says you need to practice with natives and eventually travel to China to become really fluent, as if, standing on the dirt there will make you absorb the language through osmosis somehow. But the real issue is that most people try to speak before they're ready. Think about it like learning to cook. Trying to have real conversations in Chinese before you've built a foundation is kind of like cooking only when you host a dinner party, but never practicing in private. Right? So real speaking ability gets built through private practice, effective techniques, consistently executed. So when you rush into conversations and you use native speaking conversations as your only source of practicing speaking, you tend to fumble through half the sentences, you tend to fall back on English and develop bad habits and low confidence, because it's kind of awkward and embarrassing sometimes. Often you leave sessions feeling worse, not better. You start dreading speaking practice and you lose motivation. So when you rely on native speakers too much and don't practice enough speaking outside of your sessions in the right way, you won't see much efficient or predictable improvement from session to session. You often end up using the same vocabulary, you forget new vocabulary you learned between sessions. If you're speaking to real native speakers, not just a tutor, you might end up feeling kind of awkward or embarrassed because you don't understand what they say in response, or you say something silly that doesn't make sense, or you just can't communicate. You hit a wall because you don't have enough vocabulary. And often you'll leave conversations feeling worse, not better. You start dreading speaking practice, lose motivation, which leads to a negative cycle. So to flip this around and create a positive cycle where you feel more confident and motivated every time you speak, you want to develop a habit of daily practice using highly effective speaking techniques with awesome practice materials. Then when you do speak Chinese with native speakers that you meet in your life or with tutors online, you'll notice substantial improvement every single time. That improves your confidence and improves your motivation to do more study outside of these sessions, which leads to performing even better the next time. And it's just this positive cycle of continuous speaking improvement, just generally feeling awesome and more motivated. So let me break down for you exactly how to do this and achieve this positive cycle in 3 steps. Step 1, build. Step 2, get. Step 3, activate. That's it. In build, you build your mental toolkit of characters and words. In get, you get useful sentence patterns through input. And in activate, you activate what you learned in step 1 and 2 by speaking directly from memory. So most people do this backwards. They try to activate before they've built anything, or more commonly, they build forever and never activate. Both approaches fail, right, in the long term and the short term. So let's break down each step so you know exactly what to do and when. In build, your goal is to create your mental toolkit of characters and words. You use techniques like memory palaces to learn characters and mnemonic association to learn words. I have full videos on these techniques, and you can click the link in the description to learn hundreds of words and characters for free in perfect sequence using these techniques. So because of that, I'm not going to go into detail about how to do these things right now, but just know that they work and you can learn thousands of characters and words in literally months or even weeks if you have enough time to invest per day. And one thing that trips up a lot of people, you don't need to learn 3,000 characters before moving forward. Just build to around 1,000 common characters and around 2,000 high frequency words. This covers about 90% of what you'll encounter on a daily basis. So by doing this, you are building the foundation so that you can understand what you hear and say it with confidence later. But here's a warning, do not get stuck here learning characters forever. I've seen people learn 1,000 characters and still can't speak. Even completed our course and finished 3,050 common characters. Still can't understand or speak Chinese because there's a lot more to it than that. Now, I did a similar thing. I learned 3,000 characters in a few months using memory palaces. I also learned around 5,000 or 6,000 common words, all the words from the HSK6 at the time, using mnemonics primarily. And I still couldn't speak Chinese. Now, the second step is to get comprehensible input. Your goal is to fill your brain with useful sentences. Read and listen to natural, high-frequency Chinese sentences that you can understand. One high-quality sentence for each usage of each word is enough. Now, what do I mean when I say high quality? Well, I mean that it has good context, where ideally the word could not be easily switched out for just any other word. So, for example, if you wanted to learn the word 理解, to understand in Chinese, then finding a sentence like 他不理解我 is a terrible idea. You want to find a sentence more like this. 通过这本书, through this book, 我对中国文化有了更深的理解. I have a deeper understanding of Chinese culture. Or maybe a sentence like this. 请你试着理解一下我的处境. Please try to understand my situation. Now, these are great sentences because they're not overly formal. They're how someone would actually speak. They're relatively natural. They're not too short and they're not too long. Sometimes sentences could be way too long as well, unnecessarily. So by reading and listening to these sentences every day, you're going to start to acquire the grammar. That's how to understand and use the word correctly in conversation. It's important these sentences are comprehensible. You need to understand every word and every character in every sentence for this to be super effective. So get a hold of thousands of high quality sentences plus their audio. Make sure you know all the words within them and all the characters, and then consume them every day as much as you can. But make sure you do both listening and reading. So reading definitely helps, building vocabulary and a sense of grammar, but it's more visual, it's faster, and it's easier to understand. Now, with the audio as well, though, you'll be improving your listening skill as well as your pronunciation at the same time. It's all that other great stuff. So reading and listening at the same time is great, especially when you're a beginner, because reading makes the listening easier, listening makes the reading easier. But input alone, unfortunately, is not enough. Most people just consume content for months and wonder why they still freeze up when speaking. They understand stuff but can't produce it in real time. So doing the build and get steps will give you that foundation, the fuel, if you like, to get you to fluency, but it won't get you all the way there because you can't just have fuel. It could be the best, highest quality fuel ever, but if you don't have an engine to put it into, you're never going to get to your destination, right? So that's what step 3 is all about. Step 3 is activate passive vocabulary. And this is where fluency actually happens. So your goal is to speak from memory without stressing out or guessing or scanning what you're about to say and stuttering. And there are 4 highly effective solo speaking techniques that I recommend to achieve this. And so the first is shadowing, where you repeat out loud what you hear in real time. So just play some Chinese audio, follow along speaking at the same time as the audio. So don't pause, don't translate, just mimic the audio and try to have a full understanding of what you're hearing and reading. If you want to use reading at the same time, that can also help if it's a bit more challenging at the beginning. So doing this every day builds your speaking muscles and locks in natural rhythm and tone patterns. So start with basic listening and repeating on a slower speed, and then work your way up to normal speed and full shadowing. So with no gap in between, no pause, just a slight lag after the audio, kind of like an echo. Now, the next 3 techniques are really all different ways of doing the same method. The best single method I know for developing fluency fast is called retrieval practice or active recall. Now, technically, active recall is where you try to remember anything, whether it's you're producing a Chinese character or a word from memory. But in terms of speaking, we're going to be actively recalling or retrieving entire Chinese sentences from our memory using 3 different techniques that I personally really like. And that is going to flex the muscle of fluency and actually allow you to produce Chinese in real time when you need it and under pressure effortlessly. So the first form of active recall that I like is self-talk. So narrate your life, express any thoughts, feelings, or emotions you have, describe memories, tell stories, or imagine situations in Chinese and describe them. Or if you're just starting out and you're not confident enough yet, you can just try to say some of the sentences that you've been practicing with from memory. However you do it, whatever you want to say, you just do it in 1 or 2 minute bursts throughout each day, multiple times each day. 我在想今天要做什么, like I'm thinking about what to do today. Whatever you want to say, just say something that comes to mind, and do this in the shower, on walks, during chores, even before bed, even just 5 to 10 minutes per day of doing this builds speaking agility surprisingly fast, right? So anytime you go to say a sentence in Chinese that you can't say confidently or can't say at all, note that down in English or your native language and add that sentence to your practice materials. Get it translated using AI and get audio files created. And the second form of retrieval practice is using AI, right? So what you could do is take all the sentences you're practicing with, put them into some sort of document, like a PDF, for example, upload it to ChatGPT or some other LLM, and then try out one of the prompts from this document. So just go down here to the free resources section, and you'll find this doc in this part right here. Again, sign up to the community, click the link in the description, you can get access to this instantly. And there's a bunch of AI related stuff, but for this particular video, I want to show you the Activate section. So go to the Activate tab here, speaking exercises using AI. So here are just some example prompts. There are 5 exercises that you could try out by uploading your sentences to an AI as a PDF and then adding this prompt, and this will test you on producing some of the sentences. Now, the caveat is for all of these that you need to either have a decent level of Chinese or you have to have already practiced quite a bit with the sentences. If you haven't practiced a lot with the sentences, with listen, repeating, reading, listening, shadowing, then this is going to be probably a bit too hard. So move on to active recall only once you've practiced for a bunch of reps first with the sentences, and then you can do stuff like this. So this first one, it asks to please give me the English meaning of a random sentence and ask me to say or type the Chinese from memory. So you can use the audio function and actually be speaking to it in real time. And then you can also add on whatever you want it to do after that. Or you can just ask it to move straight on to the next random one, mixing them up completely and occasionally repeating ones that you've already done to reinforce them. You can tweak this however you want. You can also do role plays. So say you've been learning a bunch of sentences recently for restaurant language. You can say, okay, let's do a role play. We're in a restaurant and I want to sort of test myself on the restaurant related sentences that are in the file that I just uploaded. This one's kind of more of a spaced repetition functionality. This one's specifically related to grammar. If you wanted to focus on a particular grammar structure, this one asks AI to create a short story or a dialogue using a mix of the sentences, or we could just say it's the vocabulary used within the sentences. And then you can summarize the story in Chinese or maybe even translate it line by line. So these all work really well. Go ahead and check it out. So whichever activity you choose to do, and maybe you choose to try out all of them, the key is structured practice, not just random chatting. You want retrieval, correction, and repetition for specific materials that you upload, ideally that you've been practicing with, so you can really nail them. Casual conversation just doesn't give you that systematic feedback and that sense of real progress. Now, the third, and in my opinion, the most effective solo speaking technique is active recall using spaced repetition software flashcards with audio, right? So ideally with audio, to create flashcards of your sentences with the English on the front, Chinese on the back. But here's the important part. You must speak the sentence aloud from the English translation before flipping the card, right? So you'll see the English, you try to say it in Chinese. Ideally, you've been practicing a lot with that sentence, so it will be challenging and you probably get it wrong the first few times, depending on your level, but you will get it right very quickly if you keep practicing with the same sentences. So when you flip the card and what you see and hear on the back of the card, that's kind of your immediate feedback. So it's just like making a mistake with a tutor and then the tutor correcting you, except this time you make the mistakes free and privately, right? So if you were wrong, just say it out loud a couple of times to correct yourself, mark it as wrong, and try again when it pops up inevitably in a few minutes' time. So doing this builds up your retrieval speed and accuracy, which is the ability to pull Chinese from your brain quickly. Now, knowing these steps is one thing. Knowing when to focus on each step, that's where most people mess up, right? So let me show you an exact daily routine that you can use based on how far you are in your Chinese learning journey. So if you're an absolute beginner starting from zero, or you know fewer than say 500 characters and 1,500 words, your goal is to build a strong foundation. Split your time roughly like 70 to 80% building, and your remaining 20 to 30% of your time listening and repeating, shadowing, and starting to do some active recall, but only after you're familiar enough with sentences where you can actually shadow them comfortably with full understanding. Now, your end goal is to learn your first 1,000 to 2,000 of the most frequently used Chinese words, along with their characters. So when you're not actively studying, when you're out and about, try to fill in the gaps of your day with as much listening practice as possible with the sentence audio when you're on your way to work, when you're at work, don't get fired, when you're at the gym, doing household chores, running errands. You want to be trying to listen to Chinese as much as you can, repeating where you can with as much focus as you possibly can. Once you know 600 or so characters and 1,000 to 2,000 words, you'll reach a lower intermediate level. Your goal shifts to transitioning from building to more getting and activating. So now you should split your time into, say, 50% of your time building, 30% of your time finding and creating example sentences, as well as doing listen, repeat, and shadowing practice. Maybe 10, 20% of your time spent on active recall. Some people like to continue to spend the vast majority of their time learning characters all the way up to 3,000. And you do eventually want to get there, and it's totally up to you if you want to do that. But here's the thing, characters alone won't make you fluent. You need to do the get and activate activities on top. Plus, you can actually get to fluency with well under like 2,000 characters and a few thousand example sentences containing the most common few thousand words. Characters become very easy to learn with memory palaces, and so it's easy to get stuck in the build stage because it's comfortable and easy to avoid the more challenging exercises that you're less familiar with, like shadowing and active recall for the words you've already learned. So try not to fall into that trap if you can. This is why people complain about the intermediate plateau, right? Basically because they're not challenging themselves or they just don't know how to. So remember, learning characters and words does not get you fluent. Practicing with them in context does. So spend half your time continuing to build all the way to 2,000 characters and the remaining half on listening, repeating, shadowing, and active recall. Whether that's using SOS flashcards, talking to yourself, or using AI. So it's during this stage as well where you should start to incorporate more and more native speaking content. So find podcasts on topics that you like, or use Notebook LM to create podcasts on anything you like, and start listening to those daily as well. This is how you'll develop more native level listening abilities. And, feel free to learn the new words that will inevitably pop up when you start to dive into immersion content. You can do that using mnemonics as well, no problem. And that will take some extra time, but it's super fun. So now once you get past 2,000 characters, you can maintain that 50-50 split until you get to 3,000, or you can lower the amount of time you spend on characters even more and spend even more time finding and practicing with example sentences and native content. But to be honest, you'll be so good at the memory palace technique at this point, you'll probably be able to learn like 50 or even 100 characters per day. So it's only like a month or two of work max to get those last 1,000 or so characters. And so really, it's up to you. With just a couple of thousand characters and a few thousand words, you could be at least B2 level fluency if you use the practice exercises I've laid out for you today. So at this point, don't worry too much about balancing all the stages or hitting specific percentages perfectly. Just ramp up listening, immersion, shadowing, active recall, and have regular speaking sessions with natives to feel that benchmark of your progress and have meaningful interactions. Just balance these activities based on your strengths, weaknesses, and personal preferences. At this level, you're not learning the language anymore, right? You're already proficient and simply maintaining and expanding on that. So here's the key takeaway here. You do not need native speakers to become fluent in Mandarin Chinese, or any language really. You need the right method, repeated input, and smart practice. The 3-step build, get, activate system will get you there without massive anxiety, without drama, without costly tutors, without wasting time. And once you've built your foundation this way, native conversations will start to feel easier and easier. They'll start to feel natural and even fun. But what I've given you here is just the general plan, of course. Actually executing on the plan and going from understanding to spoken fluency is tough. And there are a few techniques that I've learned over the years that make the process way easier. So check out this video next, where I talk about some killer techniques that make speaking Chinese a way smoother and faster process.